Most people find themselves living under the constant pressure of achieving more, doing more, and becoming more. It's a way of life ingrained into them from an early age, often without questioning its roots. The idea that you need to reach something, accomplish something, or arrive somewhere to feel complete runs deep in society. But there's a threshold, one that most people never cross, not because they aren't capable, but because it requires an entirely different kind of awareness. It requires releasing the need to cross anything at all. You've spent much of your life moving towards something, whether it's personal growth, success, or enlightenment. There's been a constant momentum driving you forward, one that tells you meaning comes from movement, and that if you're not actively pursuing something, you're stagnating. The constant striving, the hustle, the pushing yourself to become someone better or more accomplished, it all comes from the belief that fulfillment is a distant place you need to reach. However, here's the paradox that most people miss. This very pursuit, the need to keep moving forward, is the thing that keeps you from truly arriving. The more you strive to get to that elusive destination, the further away it seems. The more you push to become something, the more you're reinforcing the belief that you're incomplete as you are. What if I told you that the moment you stop striving, stop seeking, everything shifts? The moment you stop looking for something to change, everything changes naturally. But this isn't about letting go as a technique to get somewhere better. It's not a strategy to release, as if doing so will somehow improve your life. This shift happens when you stop trying to make it happen at all. When the internal machinery, the one that constantly seeks, refines, and improves, simply powers down. Not because you've forced it, but because it has completed its job and faded into the background. This is the threshold that most spiritual teachings aim to point you toward. But this threshold, this shift, doesn't announce itself in the way you might expect. It doesn't come with fanfare or a big, revelatory moment where you feel suddenly enlightened. It's often missed because it feels completely ordinary. This is precisely why so many spiritual seekers don't recognize it. They keep measuring progress, seeking a next step, or waiting for something external to validate their journey. But once you let go of the need for validation and the need for progress, you realize that everything you've been searching for was always here, within you. What's crucial to understand is that most people are caught in this cycle of seeking. They think that by pursuing something, whether it's a better job, a more fulfilling relationship, or deeper spiritual insight, they will feel complete. But as long as you are operating under the belief that fulfillment is something outside of you, it will always remain out of reach. This internal cycle of always reaching, always becoming, perpetuates a sense of incompleteness. Let me clarify, this isn't about giving up or not working toward anything. It's about understanding that true fulfillment comes not from achieving a goal or crossing a threshold, but from the recognition that you were never separate from that fulfillment to begin with. You are already whole, already complete. The key to crossing this threshold is realizing that the need to seek, the drive to become, and the notion of progress are all constructs. They aren't real, in the sense that they don't define your true essence. This shift happens when you recognize that the pursuit itself, the chase after something you think will fulfill you, is what's creating the distance between you and your desires. The constant pursuit is what keeps you in a state of lack. And when you stop chasing, when you stop attaching your sense of worth to the outcome of your efforts, everything falls into place. Most spiritual teachings, unfortunately, often reinforce this cycle of seeking. They tell you to let go, to surrender, to stop seeking. But they make the act of surrendering into a new goal. They promise you peace, but the very act of trying to surrender becomes a new way of striving. This creates a paradox. You can't stop seeking if you're using stopping as a goal. You can't try to let go of the need for control because, in trying, you're still controlling. The trick is that there's no trick. The moment you realize there's nothing to fix, nothing to accomplish, nothing to improve, everything changes effortlessly. In this space, the external circumstances of your life will shift, not because you've tried to make them shift, but because you have finally aligned with the truth of who you are. There is nothing to achieve because you already are what you've been seeking. This doesn't mean you don't take action. It means your actions come from a place of wholeness, not from a place of needing to prove something or complete something. You act, not because you need to change anything, but because you are living in alignment with your true self. But here's the part where it gets tricky. Even when you understand this intellectually, living it can still feel like a challenge. This doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, and most people's lives are built on structures of perpetual striving. Letting go of those structures doesn't happen instantly. It's a gradual process, like learning to lucid dream. In the beginning, you might catch glimpses of this truth moments when you realize you're not the character in the dream but the dreamer. But those moments might be fleeting. The more you practice this awareness, the longer the moments of clarity last. Just like lucid dreaming, where you can eventually control the dream from within the dream, you begin to experience your waking life with the same awareness. You realize that all the struggles you've been facing are simply projections from the mind that believes in lack, limitation, and separation. And once you stop reinforcing that narrative, life starts to unfold in ways you never imagined. You may still forget. You may still slip into the old patterns of striving, but the key is that each time you remember, each time you recognize the truth of who you are, you're strengthening that connection to your deeper self. Over time, the forgetting becomes less frequent, and the remembering becomes more stable, more natural. You're no longer trying to let go or force anything to change. You simply allow life to flow with you, not against you. And as you continue to embody this truth, your external reality will shift as well. Your relationships, your career, your health, they will all realign to match the vibration of your true self. This transformation isn't about forcing things to happen. It's about aligning with your inner truth and letting the external world reflect that truth. When you stop striving for something, you allow space for everything to unfold effortlessly. This process isn't about waiting for some grand moment of realization. It's about recognizing that the realization is already here. The destination you've been seeking is not somewhere out there, it's right here, within you. The very act of searching for something outside of yourself is what keeps you disconnected from it. When you stop searching, you realize that what you've been looking for has always been part of you. This is the ultimate shift. You are not a separate self trying to reach something. You are the self, and everything you've been seeking is already a part of you. It's time to stop seeking and start living in alignment with the truth of who you are. And as you do, the world around you will begin to mirror that truth in profound and unexpected ways. The expectation-driven life comes with a hidden cost. It's not just about failing to manifest your desires. It's about living in a perpetual state of subtle stress that becomes so ingrained that it feels like part of your identity. You start to believe that anxiety is your personality, that racing thoughts are your mind, and that tension is your body. However, these are merely symptoms of a much deeper issue. They are the result of living in a system organized around the belief that the present moment, as it is not enough. Take a moment to pause and reflect on this truth. You've been conditioned to think that in order to feel fulfilled, you need to be constantly striving, moving, and progressing. The idea that you're incomplete or inadequate until you reach some future goal becomes an invisible current, pulling you forward, always towards some imagined version of yourself that will finally feel whole. This is the expectation-driven life. But here's the paradox. The very momentum of striving, the constant pursuit of progress, is what keeps you from reaching the destination. The more you chase after fulfillment, the further away it seems. The more you seek to become someone else, the more you reinforce the belief that you are incomplete as you are. The truth is, the moment you stop seeking, everything changes. This is not about letting go as a technique or strategy for getting somewhere. It's about understanding that the seeking itself is what has been keeping you trapped. What happens when you release the need to seek, when you stop expecting things to change, is that everything begins to shift on its own. This isn't a magical transformation. It's the natural result of no longer being caught in the cycle of striving. When you stop trying to force things to happen, when you stop measuring your progress and tracking your state of being, something remarkable occurs. You begin to experience life without the constant pressure of self-improvement. This isn't a state of inaction or laziness. It's about recognizing that everything is already as it should be. You stop performing for an ideal future, and instead, you rest in the completeness of the present moment. And when you enter this state, everything begins to feel lighter. It's like taking off a heavy backpack that you didn't even realize you were carrying. Your shoulders can move freely, your breathing becomes effortless. Walking feels lighter, not because you've lost physical weight, but because you've dropped the psychological weight of constant self-monitoring. The internal narrative that once evaluated every action, "Am I doing this right?" begins to quiet. This state of presence doesn't require anything other than being fully here, right now. People in this state often report a heightened experience of life. Colors seem brighter, sounds clearer, and sensations more vivid. But this is not because reality itself has changed. It's because you've removed the constant filter of self-evaluation. You are now experiencing things directly, without the lens of, "What does this mean for my progress?" The present moment becomes alive, more immediate, more itself, and you begin to realize that your experience has always been full, complete, and whole. It just wasn't visible because you were too focused on reaching for something else. From a quantum perspective, this shift is significant. The observer effect, a well-known concept in quantum physics, suggests that the way we observe reality directly impacts what we experience. When you are constantly looking for evidence of your progress or lack thereof, you find it. When you are scanning for obstacles, they appear. When you feel incomplete, the universe mirrors that by presenting more incompleteness. But when your observation becomes neutral, when you stop seeking specific outcomes and instead engage with life as it is, the entire field shifts. Situations that would have once triggered you now unfold with ease. Conversations that would have required strategic navigation flow organically. Opportunities show up not because you are pushing for them, but because you are no longer filtering them through the narrow lens of your expectations. You stop seeking validation and start noticing that validation is already present within you. This is where most manifestation teachings get it wrong. They teach you to try harder, visualize more intensely, and expect outcomes with more certainty. But this only reinforces the separation between where you are and where you think you should be. It amplifies the signal of incompleteness, and the universe, being a perfect mirror, reflects that back to you. But what happens when you stop broadcasting lack? What happens when you stop waiting for reality to complete you, and instead you accept that everything is already whole? This isn't about manifesting things faster or more easily. It's about a radical shift in how you engage with reality. The universe doesn't reward you for making this shift. It simply responds to the coherence you create within yourself. And there is nothing more coherent than a system that is no longer divided. If this resonates with you, if you're beginning to feel the truth in these words, then I invite you to subscribe, not just to stay connected, but to stay aligned with this frequency. This space is not about consuming more content or seeking external validation. It's about collectively remembering what it feels like to exist without the pressure to become something else, to be exactly as we are. The more of us who embody this recognition, the more permission we give the world to be exactly as it is. Let's talk about what happens to thought in this state. For most people, thought is the primary organizing force. It plans the future, evaluates the past, and maintains a continuous narrative about who you are. Thought tells you what to do next, what's important, and what needs to change. But when expectation dissolves, the role of thought changes fundamentally. It no longer needs to be in charge. Thought still arises, of course, memories, plans, and observations, but it no longer carries the same weight. It becomes residual, like clouds passing through a vast open sky. You notice them, but you don't follow them or react to them. This isn't something you have to force. It's not about trying to control your thoughts or create more space between them. It happens naturally when the system no longer needs to maintain control. When you're not trying to manifest something, when you're not working to improve yourself, thought simply becomes a tool you can use when needed. It doesn't have to be the tyrant demanding your constant attention. Instead, it becomes an instrument that you pick up when necessary and set down when you're done. For most people, thought runs continuously. They live with the constant hum of mental activity, whether they need it or not. And this is the root of much psychological suffering. It's not what happens to you that causes pain, but the story you tell about what happens. Someone criticizes you, and for a moment, the words may sting. But the real suffering comes from the story. This means I'm not good enough. This means I'll never be successful. When thought loses its grip on your identity, these stories still arise, but they no longer have the same hold over you. You can hear the narrative starting up, but you recognize it as just another thought pattern, not a reflection of reality. The criticism still happened, but now it's just data. It doesn't define your worth. It doesn't dictate your future. This is the freedom that comes from letting go of the need to control, to strive, and to constantly evaluate. When you allow life to unfold naturally, without interference from your mental narratives, you begin to experience reality as it is whole, complete, and abundant. And when you stop resisting, when you stop trying to manipulate your experience, the world mirrors that neutrality and gives you back exactly what you've been waiting for. This shift is subtle but profound. It's not about perfection. You will still slip into old patterns. But each time you remember, you strengthen the muscle of awareness, and the moments of clarity become more frequent. You stop being defined by your thoughts and start being defined by the present moment. The world no longer exists in opposition to you. Instead, you are a participant in the unfolding of life. And as you align with that flow, everything you've been seeking begins to find its way to you naturally. The shift that occurs when expectation dissolves is far more profound than most people realize. It's not about the typical teachings of positive thinking or visualization techniques. Those practices still operate within the framework of thought, which itself remains the guiding authority in how you experience life. Positive thinking is still about selecting the right thoughts to think, but what I'm describing is when thought loses its authority entirely. It's not about arguing with negative thoughts or trying to replace them with positive ones. It's about recognizing that all thoughts, whether positive or negative, are simply movements in consciousness, not directives that you must follow or obey. What we're exploring is the transition from seeking to simply being. It's moving from a state of constant hunger for something more to a state of satisfaction with the present moment. In the seeking state, you're constantly scanning, analyzing, striving for something that you believe will make you complete. But the moment you stop, everything changes. It's not about forcing change to happen. It's about stopping the process that creates the need for change in the first place. When you stop seeking, you become present with the what is of life. And that's where everything shifts. This shift is not some mystical or magical transformation. It's a structural reorganization of how you relate to the world around you. When you're constantly seeking, there's a split in your experience. On one level, you're living your life, but on another level, you're observing it from a distance, always evaluating, judging, commenting. Am I doing this right? Is this the correct path? Should I be doing something else? This constant self-monitoring creates a layer of separation between you and your experience. It separates you from the directness of what's happening in the present moment. This split doesn't just cause mental fatigue, it also drains your energy. You're never fully inhabiting any experience because you're always analyzing it. You eat a meal, but you're also thinking about whether this food aligns with your health goals. You exercise, but you're evaluating if you're pushing hard enough to see results. You rest, but you feel guilty that you're not doing something more productive. Even in moments of joy, you're thinking about how temporary that joy is, how it's fleeting, and how you need to maximize it before it passes. This constant self-analysis creates a state of exhaustion that most people don't even recognize. They think it's just part of who they are, but in reality, it's a result of living in a state of perpetual expectation and evaluation. When expectation dissolves, this split collapses. And it doesn't collapse because you're trying to make it happen. It simply disappears because there's no longer anything to evaluate. You stop measuring the present moment against some imagined ideal. Instead of trying to be authentic, you find that authenticity emerges naturally when you're not performing for anyone, including yourself. The need to measure and evaluate disappears, and you become fully immersed in what is. The relief of this state is subtle but profound. It's like the feeling you get when you take off a heavy backpack that you've been carrying for so long that you've forgotten it was there. Suddenly, your shoulders feel lighter. Your breathing deepens. Your entire body can relax because you're no longer constantly bracing against imagined futures. This is not an instant transformation, but rather a gradual letting go of the internal pressure that you've carried for so long. It's a release that makes everything feel lighter, more fluid, and more natural. In this state of presence, the world appears brighter, clearer, more vibrant. Colors seem more vivid. Sounds become sharper. Sensations feel more alive. But this isn't because reality itself has changed. It's because you're no longer looking at it through the lens of expectation. When you stop filtering everything through the question, is this contributing to my progress, or is this getting me closer to where I want to be? You begin to experience life as it is, free from judgment and evaluation. The present moment becomes more immediate, more real, and everything in it seems to have more substance. From a quantum perspective, this is a radical shift. The observer effect is not just something that happens in a laboratory with particles, it's happening in your everyday life. Your expectations, your judgments, the meanings you impose on your experiences, they shape what you see. When you're constantly looking for evidence of your progress or scanning for obstacles, your perception of reality is filtered through that lens. But when you stop seeking specific outcomes, when you let go of the need to control every aspect of your experience, reality begins to reflect that neutrality back to you. Situations that once triggered anxiety or resistance now unfold effortlessly. Conversations that would have required you to strategize and maneuver now happen naturally. Opportunities that you might have missed because you were so focused on achieving something show up in the most unexpected ways. Not because you've manifested them, but because you've stopped filtering reality through the narrow lens of expectation. The field responds to the coherence of your presence, and it mirrors that back to you in 1,000 different ways. This is where many manifestation teachings miss the mark. They teach you to expect more, to want more, to visualize more clearly, and to feel the desired outcome more intensely. But all of this is rooted in the belief that you are incomplete and that you need something external to complete you. What I'm describing is different. It's not about attracting what you want. It's about letting go of the need to want at all. It's about releasing the belief that there's something outside of you that needs to change in order for you to feel whole. This shift is not about pushing harder or becoming more aligned with the universe. It's about recognizing that everything is already here, and that the moment you stop resisting, the moment you stop trying to control the outcome, the universe simply responds. You stop filtering reality through the lens of what should be and begin to see things as they are. It's not about manipulating the universe. It's about aligning with the flow of the universe, which has always been available to you. The changes that happen in your body and your life when you stop living in expectation are not subtle. One of the first things you'll notice is the way your nervous system recalibrates. For most of your life, your autonomic nervous system has been in a constant state of readiness, not in full fight or flight mode, but in a low-grade activation. You've been conditioned to think that staying alert is the only way to stay safe, that anticipating problems is responsible, and that maintaining vigilance is necessary. This constant low-level tension has become your baseline, and you probably don't even notice it anymore. Your muscles stay tense, your breath is shallow, your body stays in a state of preparation for something that never quite arrives. When expectation dissolves, your nervous system receives a signal that it's safe to relax. It's not that all the external threats disappear, but the internal threat detector that's been scanning for danger finally powers down. The body responds even before the mind registers the change. You'll find your breathing naturally deepening, your shoulders will drop, the tension you've carried in your jaw, your back, and your stomach will begin to melt away. Sometimes this release will come as yawning or spontaneous tears. Other times, it may show up as a deep sense of relaxation that you haven't felt in years. This isn't something you have to work at. This is the natural result of no longer living in a constant state of alertness. When there's no longer anything to become or any future you need to prepare for, your system naturally returns to its optimal state. Sleep improves, digestion becomes easier, and your immune system operates more efficiently because your body is no longer expending energy on unnecessary tension. The perception of time changes as well. When you're constantly in a state of expectation, time feels like it's always slipping away from you. You're always running out of time, always behind schedule, always needing to hurry. But when expectation dissolves, time loses its grip on you. There's no more urgency, no more background anxiety about time being wasted. Even in moments of rest or joy, you're not calculating how to maximize them because you've stopped measuring everything against a future outcome. You become fully present in the now, without part of you leaning forward into the next moment. This shift doesn't make you complacent or passive, it simply makes everything more natural. You still engage with your goals, still do what needs to be done, but none of it comes with the pressure of needing to prove something or get somewhere. The difference is that now, your actions come from a place of flow, not force. You no longer feel that internal resistance, and as a result, life flows more smoothly. When you stop striving and simply allow things to unfold, your life naturally transforms. Not because you're forcing change, but because you've stopped holding on to the need for things to be different. You've stopped resisting what is, and in that non-resistance, you allow life to express itself through you effortlessly. So, if you're feeling this recognition stir within you, if you've reached a point where the pressure to strive has lost its grip, remember this: you are not defined by the constant pursuit of something outside of yourself. The moment you let go of the need to become something, you realize that you already are everything you've ever sought. And from this place of completeness, everything you desire flows to you naturally, effortlessly, and without resistance. The shift that occurs when you dissolve the need for expectation is subtle but deeply transformative. It's not just about letting go of the future or the pursuit of something outside of yourself. It's about an internal shift that happens when the weight of expectation no longer drives your every thought, action, or decision. This shift isn't an abstract idea. It's a profound reorganization of how you relate to your life and the world around you. When you stop holding on to expectations, you create a space in your life that many might mistake for emptiness. But it's not empty, it's unburdened. This space allows the present moment to reveal its fullness without the constant overlay of comparison, measurement, or self-judgment. When you're no longer evaluating each moment for its usefulness or its potential to bring you closer to a goal, you start to experience life as it truly is, not filtered through the lens of progress or achievement. The colors in the world become more vivid, the sounds clearer, the texture of each experience reveals itself in all its richness, and time feels more expansive. This isn't a magical experience of timelessness, but rather a deeper, more fulfilling engagement with the present moment. Hours pass at the same rate, but in your experience, they feel full. When you stop dividing your attention between what is happening and what you think should happen next, each moment has room to breathe. Life becomes more immediate and alive, with no need to overanalyze or rush through it. This is the practical magic of releasing expectation, not accessing some mystical state, but simply experiencing reality without the constant pressure to make it conform to your preconceived notions. When you remove the need for everything to be productive, meaningful, or better than it is, what remains is startlingly sufficient. And here's where the shift begins to happen in a more personal, tangible way. As you release the pressure to constantly achieve or become, your identity structure simplifies. All those stories you've been telling yourself about who you are, where you've been, and where you are going begin to lose their grip. They don't disappear completely, but they no longer hold the same weight. You no longer need to defend your narrative to yourself or others. You no longer have to make sure that your actions align with some image you've created. In everyday life, this shows up in practical, simple ways. You begin to speak more plainly. There's less performance in your communication. You stop trying to impress or convince others. You say what's true and let it land however it lands. This doesn't mean you're being rude. On the contrary, it's clarity without the need for strategic positioning. You react less defensively when challenged. Your sense of self is not fragile, so criticism doesn't sting as much. You understand that criticism is just information. It doesn't have to define who you are. People around you may find this disconcerting at first. Many are used to interacting with others who are constantly managing their image, seeking validation, or negotiating their worth. When they encounter someone who's no longer performing, they often don't know how to read it. They might interpret this as coldness or detachment, but it's neither. It's precision without pretense, a more genuine way of being. This newfound authenticity doesn't mean that you're blunt or socially awkward. You still navigate relationships and contexts, but you no longer contort yourself to meet expectations that don't serve you or anyone else. You simply show up as you are, and trust that that is enough. Remarkably, it usually is. When you let go of the need to prove yourself, your relationships become more honest. Not because you're consciously practicing radical honesty, but because the effort required to maintain facades is simply not worth it anymore. When you no longer need to impress others or manage their perception of you, truth becomes the path of least resistance. This doesn't mean that you stop being polite or considerate. It means that you no longer try to twist yourself to fit someone else's idea of who you should be. Lying, even in small social situations, no longer feels comfortable. The internal friction that comes from performing for others disappears. You speak what's true and let it stand as it is. And in doing so, you become more effective in your communication and more present in your relationships. This shift doesn't make you less capable. In fact, it makes you more capable. When you stop maintaining a facade or defending a position, you free up your energy to focus on what truly matters. Your attention becomes clearer. Your responses are more appropriate. more in tune with the present moment. Creativity flows more naturally because it's not being filtered through the lens of whether it makes you look good or aligns with your self-image. You'll notice that comparison no longer holds the same weight. You're no longer measuring yourself against others or trying to position yourself in some social hierarchy. You simply exist, doing what you do, and it doesn't have to mean anything about your relative worth. This is the profound simplicity of releasing expectation. Everything becomes more fluid, more authentic, more you. You stop feeling the need to validate yourself or seek approval from others. Compliments are nice, but they're not essential. Criticism becomes feedback, not a measure of your value. This sense of release also extends to how you relate to your past. The old stories about your trauma, your achievements, your defining moments, they become just stories. They still hold meaning, but they no longer define who you are. You can acknowledge your history without feeling like it dictates your future. You can learn from your past without being trapped by it. And here's where it gets even more interesting. In this space, life doesn't need to be analyzed or interpreted constantly. Days unfold naturally, without requiring commentary. You wake up, move through your day, meet your responsibilities, rest when you need to, and simply experience each moment without the ongoing narration. There's no voice in your head constantly questioning whether you're doing it right, measuring your performance, or evaluating the significance of every choice. You simply are, and that's enough. This can feel anticlimactic to a mind that's been trained to find meaning in every moment. Where's the peak experience? Where's the breakthrough moment? Where's the dramatic transformation that confirms you've arrived? The absence of these dramatic moments can make it feel like you're missing something, but the very fact that you're no longer seeking or evaluating every experience shows that you're no longer bound by the old framework of needing to achieve something. This space doesn't deliver peak experiences because it's not oriented toward peaks. It doesn't offer dramatic transformations because it recognizes that what you already are doesn't need to be transformed. It doesn't confirm your arrival because the very idea of arrival is based on the belief that you were ever lost. Responsibilities are met without internal resistance. Not because you've developed more discipline, but because the inner division that once fought against responsibility has dissolved. You no longer have to debate with yourself about what you want to do versus what needs to be done. When the division between these parts of yourself is no longer present, action becomes simpler. You do what's needed without the internal negotiation. Joy arises without pursuit. Instead of seeking the next pleasurable experience, joy simply appears when it's there to be felt. A moment of sunlight, a simple conversation, the taste of water when you're thirsty, these moments become sufficient on their own. You no longer feel the need to maximize, prolong, or capture every moment. You simply allow them to be. Difficulty still arises. Life does not become frictionless. You still encounter challenges, but when these challenges arise, they no longer become part of your identity. A challenge is just a challenge. You engage with it without letting it define you, without making it mean something about your worth or your progress. You solve what you can solve and accept what you can't without the drama of resistance. The absence of drama can often be mistaken for the absence of life. People might think that if you're not chasing goals or striving towards something, you must have given up or become complacent. But this isn't resignation. It's simply the natural rhythm of life when you're no longer addicted to the pursuit of achievement. The groundedness you feel in this space isn't the result of a practice. You're not trying to get grounded. You're not doing techniques to feel more present. You simply are present because there's nowhere else to be. The tendency to dissociate, to escape into thought, to avoid the present moment through fantasizing about the future or replaying the past, all of that loses its appeal when you stop measuring each moment by what it should be. Your relationship with pleasure also changes. Instead of constantly seeking the next peak experience, pleasure becomes more straightforward and natural. Food tastes better because you're actually tasting it. Music moves you because you're listening to it without the distraction of thoughts. Physical sensations become more vivid because you're present in your body, not observing it from a distance. The shift in your awareness and how you relate to reality becomes profound. You become more attuned to the present moment. Not because you're trying to be, but because you've let go of the need to make each moment something more than it already is. And in that simplicity, in that release, life reveals itself in its fullness. Releasing expectation creates a space in which relationships can flourish naturally, grounded in genuine intimacy rather than tactical connections. In this space, integration occurs effortlessly, without the need for declarations or deep processing. Experiences emerge and resolve without the need for analysis or interpretations. Emotions rise and fall without leaving behind the burden of needing to clear them away. Your system no longer relies on the layers of meaning-making that typically separate you from direct engagement with reality. You may notice changes in how you approach your inner life, such as no longer feeling the need to record every insight you have. Insights still come, but now they no longer feel like possessions that need to be captured for future reference. You might stop tracking your mood or constantly measuring your energy levels, not because you're avoiding your inner experience, but because the need to manage it diminishes. Life starts to feel simpler, though not in a way that makes things easier, but rather more direct and uncomplicated. Instead of constantly filtering everything through your projections, expectations, and stories about the world, you begin engaging with what is truly in front of you. The field, or the world around you, responds in a corresponding way, meeting you with a level of ease. Resources appear when needed. Solutions arise without forced effort, and the right people show up at the right times. This isn't magic, it's simply a result of no longer creating interference with constant mental noise about how things should be different. This shift goes beyond the accumulation of more spiritual knowledge or techniques. It's about anchoring into the remembrance that you don't need to become anything you're not already. The more of us who stop performing for some imaginary audience or living for an external validation, the more the collective consciousness reflects this realization. We're no longer seeking, we're remembering what was already there within us, the truth that everything we've been searching for was always right here. What happens in this space is a deepening process. It's not static. It doesn't happen in a singular moment of realization and then remain the same forever. Instead, it's a continuous unfolding where each day, each week, and each month, the system relaxes deeper into sufficiency. Old patterns, habits, and layers of conditioning begin to surface and dissolve effortlessly. You might find that long-standing preferences change, or habits that once defined your routine simply drop away. This doesn't happen through force or willpower. It happens organically as your system recalibrates to be more present, rather than constantly pursuing something else. Relationships, too, begin to shift. Those that once felt essential may no longer seem necessary. You may no longer feel bound by people or situations that you once thought were fundamental to your life. You'll find yourself drawn to different environments. Spaces that once felt stimulating might now feel overwhelming, while places that were once dull may now feel nourishing. This isn't because you're becoming more sensitive in a mystical way, but because you've stopped filtering everything through the lens of your past judgments, projections, and desires. You simply experience reality more fully, without the filters you once applied. As this transformation unfolds, there is also a natural discernment that arises. You start to feel the difference between what is truly aligned with your essence and what's been a product of conditioning, both yours and society's. You can tell the difference between guidance that arises from a place of presence and advice that comes from someone else's seeking state. You begin to recognize when you're being offered solutions to problems you don't actually have. This doesn't lead to cynicism or detachment, but rather to a form of openness grounded in clarity. You're no longer defending yourself against manipulation. You can listen to others' opinions without feeling compelled to internalize them as your truth. This process of dissolving seeking doesn't mean you stop evolving or growing. Growth continues to happen, but it no longer comes from a place of fixing yourself. You learn because you're curious, not because you're trying to become someone else. You change because life asks you to adapt, not because you need to become someone better. Evolution continues, but there's no longer an underlying assumption that who you are right now is insufficient. You're not trying to better yourself. You're simply learning and adapting as part of the natural rhythm of life. For those who are beginning to experience this, it's important to note that this isn't a process of knowledge accumulation. It's a journey of inner remembering, a return to the truth of who you've always been. The more we anchor into this frequency of sufficiency, the more we create a space for others to remember it as well. This isn't about gathering more data. It's about embodying the truth of our existence. When we remember that we've always been enough, that we've always been whole, we shift our energy, our vibration, and the entire quantum field responds to that shift. As you continue on this path, you might notice that certain behaviors you once thought were integral to your life simply no longer fit. Long-held habits, preferences, and even relationships begin to fall away. This isn't because you're actively trying to change or control these things, but because they no longer serve your state of being. It's the natural outflow of no longer living in a state of constant anticipation or striving. What used to be essential now reveals itself to be optional, and you make space for new things, new ways of being, new connections. As this shift deepens, you may find yourself becoming more sensitive to energy, not in a mystical or supernatural sense, but in a grounded and intuitive way. You begin to sense the energy in people, places, and environments more clearly, because you're no longer filtering everything through the lens of your own projections. This heightened sensitivity allows you to discern more clearly what's right for you. You stop wasting energy on things that aren't aligned with your truth, and instead, your energy flows more freely where it's most needed. The dissolution of seeking also doesn't mean that you stop growing, evolving, or experiencing challenges. Life will continue to present obstacles and difficulties, but when they arise, you'll engage with them without the emotional baggage of thinking that they define you or are indicative of your worth. A challenge is just a challenge. It doesn't become a reflection of your inadequacies. You approach life with ease, no longer fighting against it, but simply being present in it. One of the most striking changes that happens when expectation dissolves is the way your perception of time shifts. When you're in a constant state of seeking, time feels scarce. You're always rushing, always pushing to get somewhere else. You feel the weight of time slipping away, and there's never enough of it. But when expectation dissolves, time releases its grip on you. There's no longer the anxiety that comes with feeling like you need to get somewhere, do something, or achieve something. Time slows down. Pauses no longer feel like delays. The present moment becomes enough, and you no longer feel the need to rush through it. This shift in time perception doesn't make you complacent or passive. It doesn't mean you stop moving toward your goals or fulfilling your responsibilities. Instead, it means you approach life with a sense of calm and presence. There's no more urgency, no more sense of rushing. You engage with what's in front of you without feeling the need to control or manipulate it for a particular outcome. With this shift in how you experience time, you also begin to notice how everything around you falls into place. What once felt like struggle or effort becomes ease. Opportunities appear without you forcing them. People come into your life not because you've been chasing them, but because you've created space for them by simply being present and grounded in your own reality. This is the transformation that happens when you stop performing for a future version of yourself. You let go of the pressure to become someone else and simply allow life to unfold naturally. You stop living in the story of not enough and step into the fullness of the present. And in doing so, the entire field responds. You don't need to force anything anymore because you've aligned with the truth of who you are, and that truth is sufficient. The more you embody this, the more the world reflects it back to you, and the more effortlessly you move through life. This is the space of freedom, freedom from expectation, freedom from the narrative of becoming, freedom to simply be. And when you're in that space, everything changes, not because you're trying to make it change, but because the absence of struggle creates the space for all things to flow naturally into their right place. In this space, you are not only a receiver of experiences, but an active participant in the unfolding of your life. It's no longer about achieving something or reaching some end point. It's about being fully present in each moment and allowing life to move through you.